As sure a sign as inflation as you're ever going to see, the M2 money supply. So we're going to come down here, read my man Brian Westbury, who I'm a big fan of First Trust Portfolios. Westbury rocks, and you should subscribe to him for sure. Does anyone care that Keynesianism doesn't work anymore? And here's his issue right here. The M2 money supply has tripled, right here. M2 money supply has tripled since 2007, with the introduction of quantitative easing as a new way for the Federal Reserve to manage the economy rather than wait for the market itself to heal. So Westbury, like most economists, is very worried about M2 money supply. And what is M2, you're just asking? Well, it's going to be all the cash that we have out there, your checking accounts, savings accounts, plus your literally liquid cash. I got a $100 bill in my pocket right now. So it's going to be all that is M1, plus savings deposits, small denomination time deposits, CDs, less than $100,000, which are but not IRA or KEO balances or at depository institutes. We don't want IRA money in here. We don't want KEO balances in here. We just want liquid cash that's available for you to spend and consume right now. It's not tied up to any retirement requirements or anything like that. Balances in retail money market funds, less again IRA and KEO balances in money market funds. So that's going to be your M2. It's going to be all the liquid cashes out there, plus your non-retirement accounts, time deposits, CDs, savings accounts, and money market accounts. That's M2. And Brian says, and rightly so, he goes, look, M2 has increased from 2007 when it was at 7.118 trillion to now in 2025 at 21.762 trillion. All right, so we take our trusted calculator, that's 18 years, we make 18 our N. We say we have 7118 plus minus is our present value, zero payment. We go to 21762 is our future value. Compute I. We've grown by 6.4% a year. 6.4% a year as the M2 money supply. All right, 6.4% a year, M2. Now we're going to go down to 1989, another 18-year time frame. From 1989 right there to 2007, that's another 20-year time frame, or 18 years. And we're going to say 1989, it was 2,991 trillion. And then again, 7,118 trillion in the future value. That had grown by 4.93% a year. All right, interesting. Isn't it very interesting? 1989 to 2007, M2 grew by 4.93. 2007 to 2025, M2 grew by 6.41% a year. Very interesting. Then we're going to go to the previous 18 years, from 1971 to 1989. From 1971, you'll see right there, M2 was at 1971, excuse me. 1971 was at 717 right there. Oops. 632, excuse me, I can't skip on there. 632. So we say 632 is our present value. Then we go to 1989 is at 2991. And that gives us future value, a growth of 9% a year. 1971 to 1989, M2 is growing at 9% a year over those 18 years. And then the beginning of M2, where the Fed started keeping track of it, 1959 is at 287, and 1971 is at 672. So over those was at 12 years. 12 is an N. 287 is our present value. 632 is our future value. That grew at 6.8% a year. All right. So we got four different basically time frames here. We got 1959 to 1971. M2 grew at 6.8% a year. 1971 to 1989, it grew by 9% a year. 1989 to 2007, it grew by less than 5% a year, 4.93. And 2007 to 2005, it grew. 2025, it grew by 6.41. All right, so basically, the time frame of the 2007 to 2025, where Brian is saying is tripled, M2 money supply has tripled. Of the four time frames we're using here, that's the third largest in terms of increase. It went from 9% in 1971 to 1989 to 6.8% from 1959 to 1971, 6.4% a year from 2007 to 2025, to 1989 to 2007 went up 4.93. And so then we just look at the CPI. Let's take a look here. We're going to add a line here. We're going to go to Edit Graph. And we're going to add a line, boink, add line. We're going to hit CPI. CPI, let's pause it so we can Make sure we're getting it right. Make sure these are the same years. We added CPI. We're going to go back to 1959 here. 1959 to have the comparison right there in January. Kaboomba, kaboomba. And what you'll see here is this is the CPI in the green, the mountain chart there. And you can see this is the increase in the M2. All right, so we'll see a sudden increase in M2. That makes it look like, oh my goodness, M2 increase makes it seem like it keeps up with inflation or it drives inflation. Yet, ironically enough, the CPI was going down in 1980. All right, remember from 1971 to 1989, the growth of M2 was 9% a year, average 9% a year. And yet, look at that. Huh, that's weird. 1971 it went up, and kind of strange, is it not? It's like there's two completely different scenarios there. Huh. And yet M2 is growing up over that 18-year time frame by 9% a year. And yet from 1971, it grew like crazy. To 1980, it's topped off, and then 1980 to 1989, it did not grow like crazy. But let's take a look. Let's just go to 1980 to 1989 and see what it looks like. 1980 to see if indeed M2 is indicative of inflation. All right, we're going to go to 1989 here. Boink, and we're going to show you there. And so what we're going to see here is M2 is in blue. It's still growing. In fact, M2 went from 482. Let's do January right there. We'll do that. It doesn't matter. It went from 482 to 2991. M2. 1482. It doubled in those 9 years. It went from basically 1,500 to 3,000. So it's still growing at over 7% a year. Look at that. It went from 1,500 to 3,000 in the course of those 10 years, basically. That's a 7.2% growth, which is much higher than it's been since 2007 to 2025. And yet, what was inflation doing? Inflation was dropping. Kind of crazy. The point is, M2 isn't indicative at all of high inflation. It's just not, because if we actually go to, we're going to start here, go to 2000, right there, we'll go to all the way up to 2020. Let's go to 2019, shall we? Yeah. All right, there we go. So here's CPI. Look at that, flat as a board, basically 2.5%, yet M2 is growing like crazy. So we got M2 growing from 1,400 and 1980. I want to do 2000. Excuse me, I thought I had 2000 here. There we go. Point. Finnegan. So here's M2 going from 4,667 to 14,446. 4,667. That's a almost a 6% increase each and every year of M2, which is almost along the lines of what we had from 2007 to 2025. And look at inflation. Didn't do much. I mean, there's 2.4, 3.2 floating around. Under 2% based the whole decade of the teens. Look at that. And yet M2 is going, look at the decade of the teens from 2008, 7,453 to freaking 14,46. From 2008 to 2020, we see a significant 7,453. So let's put this on. So almost a 6%, about 5.5% increase in M2, and yet inflation was low. So does M2 indicative of inflation? No, it's just not, man. It's just, it could be. Again, always. I don't want to say correlation is causation or not, but at the end of the day, we had massive growth of M2. From 2007 to 2025, M2 grew at 6.4% and pretty low inflation in the overall scheme of things. It just was. 1989 to 2007, M2 grew by basically 5%, and we had higher inflation in that time than we have from 2007 to 2025. Just fact. 1971 to 1989, M2 grew by 9% a year. We had pretty big inflation from 1971 to 1980, but then we had low inflation from then, or significantly dropping inflation. And then we had from 1959 to 1971, M2 was growing by 6.8%. And no one's going to sit there and say that high inflation that started in the late 60s, but certainly not before that. And yet I've proven it to you already. M2 is growing by leaps and bounds. Anyway, I'm not saying Brian Westbury is saying inflation is imminent. I'm not saying that in the least, but I'm just saying at the end of the day, M2 inflation is a hell of a lot more. A lot of other factors are inflationary than M2. That's just fact. Hey, love your thoughts. God bless. Smash that like button.